Welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. We're doing something we've never done before. We're doing something that the show has never done, and something that I don't think I've ever done on any of the shows that I've ever done. And that's, we're going to have a little bit of a watch-along tonight. Usually the show happens at 8 a.m., bright and early, on a beautiful Tuesday and Friday morning. Today was a little bit different. Today, I probably should have communicated this. I had a lot of things going on in the house, and so I said, all right, we're not gonna do the show in the morning. Had to get the kids out of the house. We're getting close to the end of the summer, which is also going to help dictate what time this show is actually going to settle in on once football starts up, once September rolls around. But in the meantime, I sat back and I was like, all right, I was going to do the show at 5 o'clock. And then I said, no, the Eagles play at 7:30, so we could do a little bit of a watch-along. We will watch the Eagles starters who are expected to get one series tonight. We're going to watch along. Now, I can't have it on the screen because if I do, that's bad, very bad. YouTube and X and Facebook, they all freak out and they make me take it down. So we're not going to do that. But you'll get to watch it on whatever device you choose, and I'll watch it over here on the side screen. We'll have a little moment here where we'll watch it together. But I figured in the meantime, there's a lot to talk about with your team, your town, your Philadelphia Phillies, and quite the redemption arc for Joel Embiid, who went from being a GOAT to perhaps the GOAT of USA basketball, did exactly what he was supposed to do, did exactly what U.S. basketball had hoped he would be, and the game that he would ultimately deliver for the U.S. He did it against Serbia, he did it against Nikola Jokic, and it is a large reason that USA basketball is about to play for the gold medal. We'll get into all of that and more. I want to thank anybody and everybody who joins me live in the comments. Of course, if you're watching the show right now, I always prefer that you watch it over on the Russ Joy Show YouTube account. But if you're on the Joy Media account, by all means, you can be there. But sometimes we have that thing where the comments break down, where some people are on one channel commenting and some are on others. If you're watching on X, remember you have to click the video in order to get that weird little old view, the old Periscope view, and then I can pull your comments up on screen. And if you're watching over on Facebook on the Joy Media account, by all means, you can comment and have at it. But we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. And again, there's something unique about being able to watch the Eagles as they go out and actually, well, they put a little bit on the field, right? Like the nice thing is that all of the training camp stuff that typically drives me nuts and I've been talking about for weeks on this show, well, it finally culminates in something. We actually have something to watch. We actually have the ability now to see what Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley have been working on. Or will we? You know, right now the plan is that all starters, the starters are going to get a series on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. Whether or not that happens remains to be seen. Is it possible that Jalen Hurts could be a late scratch? It is. Is it possible that any of the guys that you would hope to see are going to be a late scratch? It's possible that they take on the Ravens as this is happening. Now, if you're listening in the podcast feed, hours after the fact, or perhaps at some point over the weekend, obviously, the end of the show, when we do the watch-along, might not be quite as fun for you, unless something really big or important happens. However, nothing good ever really happens in preseason, right? Like, typically, if the first preseason game, you go, oh, there's a big story, it's typically bad. Though I will go back to, I don't remember the year. What was it, 2004? It was 2004, because that was the year ESPN NFL 2K5 came out with T.O. on the cover. 2004, if we go back in the Wayback Machine, there was a really magnificent moment. And you probably know what I'm talking about. It was Terrell Owens and Donovan McNabb hooking up on an 81-yard preseason touchdown against Ray Lewis and that vaunted Baltimore Ravens defense. I was at a friend's house at the time. I actually do remember this now. I don't know why this is like such a vivid memory, but it was T.O. wore number 81. It was an 81-yard. It was a play-action pass. T.O. streaking down the field, and everybody, it was the big story that weekend coming out of that game was imagine what McNabb and T.O. are going to be able to do together. And boy, they sure did it, right? That was the best season of Donovan McNabb's career. You could make a case that it was the best season of T.O.'s career, most impactful. They go on to make it to the Super Bowl. They get very close to winning a Super Bowl. A fully healthy T.O., maybe they win it. McNabb doesn't puke in the huddle and kind of fall apart. They maybe win that Super Bowl against the Patriots. But that was like a beautiful omen for what the season was going to be. Now, obviously, things can go sideways. There have been injuries in the past. You obviously hope that that doesn't happen. You start this game tonight, and really it maybe allows for, well, what you hope is that you get a little taste of what Kellen Moore's offense is going to look like. You get a taste of what Vic Fangio's defense is going to look like. You are probably going to see a lot of reporters and media trying to do breakdown, sideline analysis, body language analysis of both Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. We saw them earlier this week riding the golf cart together. So there has been at least some sort of an effort on the part of the coach and the quarterback to at least put out publicly that there is nothing wrong, everything's hunky-dory. We will see tonight what everything looks like. We'll see what the dynamics on the sideline are. Don't read too much into anything. If you get yourself worked up, if it looks like at some point Sirianni and Hurts aren't on the same page, just remember, it is the first preseason game. Everybody just take a chill pill. But in the meantime, we do get to watch a little bit of football, even though it's not meaningful football. We'll get there a little bit later. But I do want to start with the Phillies, and I do want to start with Joel Embiid. And let's start with the Phillies, because on Tuesday, I had grave concerns. And I said to all of you, we'll have a moment of honesty. Should we have a moment of honesty? Let's have a moment of honesty. Let me see if I can override my camera remotely so that we can have like a beautiful moment here. Hold on. Oh, you know what I can do? Hold on. We're gonna have the moment of honesty camera. There's gonna be a separate camera for this. Hold on. This is gonna be great. Or it's gonna be horrible. It's gonna be one or the other, and I'm not sure which yet, okay? We're gonna have the moment of honesty camera. It's gonna be over on the side. All right, here we go. Everybody get ready for it. All right, it's time. Can we have a moment of honesty? We need to have a moment of honesty. I was worried a few days ago that the Phillies were going to fall apart. I was worried that a lot of the hitting issues that we saw and the ability of this team to work themselves out of funks, how it had gone away, I was worried. And I was worried about Rob Thompson's strategic in-game decisions. And I was worried about what would happen if pitching regressed. But the Phillies, they did what they're supposed to do. As a high-powered lineup and as a very expensive team, they picked up the last two games against the Dodgers. And then last night, they started off with a very strong performance against the Diamondbacks. So now maybe we can rein in just a little bit of the upset feelings that we had a couple of days ago. Okay, this is me admitting that like I'm not 100% back with the Phillies, but I do feel like they're going in the right direction. Okay, that was the honesty moment. All right, so let's bring it back. Okay, because that's what ultimately this is all about. I like to try to be honest with you. I don't like to hide from my opinions on things with these teams. And in fairness, the Phillies weren't very good. They weren't very good for the last few weeks. And I'm not going to say that picking up the last 2 out of 3 games against the Dodgers, all of a sudden everything is rectified. It doesn't negate the concern or the fear around the Phillies rotation having an injury and things going to shit. That hasn't changed. It doesn't change the fact that the Phillies lineup has had really bad cold streaks. And that unfortunately, a lot of their best hitters all went cold at the same time. It doesn't change that. But you at least have to admit, even if you were like me and you felt like some of the people in the comments on Tuesday's show, if you felt upset or worried or nervous in any way about what the Phillies had shown you since the All-Star break, winning 2 on the road against the Dodgers is good. It really is. It's a moment that I said on Tuesday. Every team is coming after the Phillies with their best effort every game because they're one of the best teams in baseball. And in fact, after beating the Diamondbacks last night, the Phillies now have the 3rd best record in all of Major League Baseball against teams with a 500 or better record. That's a great sign. It actually kind of puts to bed the argument from just before the All-Star break that, well, the Phillies have a great record, but they haven't really beaten anybody. How will they perform against the best teams in baseball? Again, 3rd best record in all of Major League Baseball against teams with a 500 record or better. So they're not fraudulent. 2 wins against the Dodgers on the road, big. I would actually argue that going into Arizona last night and pulling off the kind of win they did, JT Realmuto kind of pulling his head out of his rear end, hitting a deep home run, looking like a much more confident player, that goes a long way. The Phillies' bats have come back alive, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So if you were concerned the other day, I think you at least right now have to feel a little bit better. Now, the Phillies, as of recording, don't take the field for almost 3 more hours, 2.5 hours. We'll see how the rest of the series plays out. I said on Tuesday, it is critical that they at least split the series with the Diamondbacks because of what's coming up next. For those of you who are unaware, for those of you who didn't pay attention the other day, the Phillies have not exactly the best stretch of games coming up. They've got NL East games out the wazoo. When they get back into town, they host the Marlins, they host the Nationals, and then they host the Braves. And I said that if the Dodgers series hadn't gone particularly well, I said that if the start of the Diamondback series doesn't go well, you could be in a situation where that 5.5 game lead that you entered with on Tuesday could have been whittled down. The Phillies have benefited because they've played well. The Braves have since faltered. The Mets have since faltered. The Phillies, as of Friday night, 8-game lead over the Mets, 8.5-game lead over the Braves. Now again, we always have to qualify things. We always kind of have to put a little bit of a disclaimer, right? If the Phillies go and have a good enough rest of the series against the Diamondbacks, and they manage to either extend that lead or keep it around 8.5 games, you're in good shape. You are, because then at that point, you hope you can beat the lowly Marlins. I know they're the Marlins. I have nightmares of Jeff Conine. I know. I'm afraid of the Marlins. I shouldn't be, but I am, and you are too. The Nationals. You should be able to beat the Nationals. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They're not playing particularly well. You should be able to win that series. So much of what the rest of the Philly season is going to be comes down to that Braves series. So you're 2-ish series away, right? Finish the Diamondbacks, Marlins, Nationals. That Braves series is going to be massive. That starts August 20th. That's the time that everybody circles on the calendar. That's when it's like back to school time for the kids, or at least for the teachers. It's back to school time. That's when things get very real for this Phillies team. And if they're able to go into that series with that 8.5 game lead, all of a sudden, it doesn't make that series feel quite as critical. It doesn't make it a must sweep or a must win 2 out of 3. You want that. You want to extend that lead. That series is going to be big. But hey, for right now, the Phillies are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. I feel significantly better 3 days later than I did on Tuesday. I assume that you do as well. All right, let's go over to the comments. Reed DeFord says hi. Hello, Reed. I've got Josh White checking in about Joel Embiid and about the Eagles, so we'll get there in a second. Now, if you're concerned, by the way, if you're sitting out there, you're worried about the Phillies, we will talk about them more on Tuesday. And I do have a programming note. Next week, I am expecting the first guest in the history of the Russ Joy Show. And it's a big guest. It's somebody that many of you have listened to for a very long time in this market. Is that a hint? Perhaps it is. But there's going to be a very nice guest on next week's show. I think it'll be the Friday show. So stick around for that. Keep an eye on social media. That'll be one that you won't want to miss. We'll get into some of the radio stuff that's happening, by the way. Maybe we'll talk about that for a second here. Josh White asks, is there a prediction for the Phillies matchup in that Phillies-Braves series? No. I have no idea how that's going to line up yet. It's way too far away. Obviously, you have to hope that Wheeler's going to pitch in that series. Obviously, if Wheeler's pitching, Nola will as well. You would expect that Suarez would probably get the third game in that series. But who knows? The real thing always comes back to this, right? The fifth starter. We don't know who the fifth starter is going to be. We have no idea. And even going down the stretch and into October, we don't know who the fifth starter is going to be on this team. They obviously, many times over, have wanted it to be Taijuan Walker. I have no idea. I almost feel like it's going to be an open competition. They're going to kind of ride the hot hand. We'll see. But it's way too far away to come up with what the matchups are going to look like there. All right, let's go to the other big news from Philly sports before the Eagles take the field, and we do our little watch-along. Joel Embiid has redeemed himself. Joel Embiid has answered the critics. En français, bonjour mes amis. Joel Embiid silenced that weird part of basketball Twitter.
That Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo give the U.S. basketball team a better chance of being successful in the international game with the FIBA rules.
Those people got curb stomped. Joel Embiid went out and did exactly what he was supposed to do. What are we talking about? What did we talk about before the Olympics got started? What did we talk about with Joel Embiid? You guys remember? You remember. I remember. We said Joel Embiid choosing the United States was not even so much a luxury as a necessity for U.S. basketball. And it wasn't because the U.S. team wasn't going to be good enough to potentially make or even win a gold medal. No. The idea was that Joel Embiid was going to be able to be the deciding factor, the determining factor in whether or not U.S. basketball were able to get past teams like Serbia, who have a big, just like Nikola Jokic. And we have talked ad nauseum at this point about Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic. Heads up. Joel Embiid typically eats his lunch. But early in the tournament, early in it, we all remember, you may remember where you were, Nikola Jokic, he punked Joel Embiid. I would even venture as far to say he kind of made Joel Embiid his bitch. In that game, Embiid doesn't play the first game. Embiid is in a weird spot where you start to worry. Does he not fit Steve Kerr's system? Is Steve Kerr also of the mindset that we can't play through Joel Embiid? He is slowing down our offense too much. He's too inefficient. He doesn't look like he's in shape. Charles Barkley goes on to, I forget which outlet it was. Barkley says that he looks fat and out of shape and that this should be a wake-up call. And people were legitimately wondering, is Joel Embiid going to be the big version of Jason Tatum, Jason Tatum. His face is on a milk carton somewhere. Où est Jason Tatum? Je ne sais pas. Où est le lait? Right? Le lait? Like milk, right? Milk carton or whatever. Anyway, Jason Tatum, not playing. Apparently his mom's upset too. That was the big thing today. Jason Tatum's mom went on Twitter and was complaining that her son's not playing and he's not hurt and all that. Okay, cool. Because he's a fraud. He's not the best player on the Celtics. Everyone knows that. Except Boston fans. Anyway, Joel Embiid goes out and has himself a game against Nikola Jokic, and especially in the second half. You know, you look at where Serbia was. Serbia is up double digits at half. Right before halftime, you start to get the feeling that Embiid was more locked in. He looked more like himself. He looked more like mid-season Embiid, not slow, out of shape, knocking the rust off in the preseason Joel Embiid. He looked more like the MVP. When you got close to halftime, you started to feel the tide turning just a little bit. Now, Bogdanovic had some big shots. Jokic, I felt like, was a little bit wishy-washy in the first half of that game. The second half, things got a little bit weirder. But what Joel Embiid did was exactly what he's supposed to do. He altered shots. He was a significant deterrent against Jokic in the second half of that game. Now, was he perfect? No. Were there times that Joel Embiid got blown by? Yes. Were there moments that Embiid lost his defensive assignment? Sure. But when you go back and you break down the second half of that game, Nikola Jokic was not comfortable. And you also have to give legitimate credit to LeBron James for manning up and in some pretty critical possessions late in that game. LeBron James banged with Jokic in the post. I know that a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about LeBron James. Totally get it. But like we can all kind of acknowledge here that LeBron's a hell of a player, right? Like we can acknowledge that. We can also acknowledge the fact that it would have been really cool to see Joel Embiid and LeBron James playing together, right? Like we can admit that. I think we can. But like you started to see, especially in that second half, Joel Embiid hitting big shots in rhythm, getting the ball at midcourt, taking a few steps, hitting a pull-up jumper. You saw Joel Embiid crash the boards. You saw Joel Embiid get a couple of and ones late in that game. And if you think that I'm crazy, if you think I'm overrating it because I've just spoken very positively about Joel Embiid in the past, I will simply point out that LeBron James had a lot of very nice things to say about Joel Embiid. I'm going to see if I can find the one clip because it was after the game. LeBron didn't tout himself. LeBron didn't say that it was all him, that he was the one who affected the game in the most meaningful way. He gave a shout out to two guys on that team. One was Steph Curry, who was absolutely unconscious, had 36 points in the game, was fantastic. Embiid was 8 of 11 from the field, 19 points. I can't find it now, but it was in the huddle after the game. LeBron shouted out both Curry and Embiid and said that they carried the U.S. team. that they were the reason that the U.S. advanced. Now, you do also have to give credit, obviously, to Kevin Durant, who hit some massive shots down the stretch. Again, you do have to credit LeBron James, who had a triple-double in that game. There were a lot of guys who had a hand in that game, not Jason Tatum, but there were a lot of guys in that game who had a significant impact. But Embiid did everything he was asked of him. And he looked like an efficient player. And it was funny because you start to listen to some of the national pundits. At least I do. I like to kind of have a temperature on how the national guys are talking about the players from this market. Because in fairness, in Philadelphia, one of the things that we are notorious for is we overrate our good players and we'll underrate the others. And in the case of Embiid, a lot of times there have been accusations that we have overrated what Joel Embiid is. Now, how exactly do you overrate a former league MVP? I'm not exactly sure. I think that where it gets a little bit tricky is that there seem to be, there are groups in this town who tend to think that Embiid is infallible. And they don't acknowledge the fact that Embiid can actually have some struggles from time to time. And that's okay. That's just part of the game. But Joel Embiid looked like an efficient player. And I was listening to Bill Simmons on the Ringer Podcast Network, brought to you by Buc-ee's. Just kidding. But I was listening to Bill Simmons. And Bill Simmons on his show, I don't know which day it came out. It was either yesterday, I think it was last night. I listened to it this morning on 2.5 speed like a psycho. He and the guys on his show were talking about the fact that this might have been the best Joel Embiid performance they'd ever seen in a high leverage situation, in a meaningful game. Because as we all know, Joel Embiid in the postseason, there have been mixed results. In this game, when called upon, when he was given the ball in his hands late in the game, which is typically a point of time that I say, please God, take the ball from him, he performed and he executed down the stretch. So all of a sudden, Joel Embiid looked every bit like an MVP guy and looked every bit like a player that you maybe could trust late in the game. He looked like a guy that you could conceivably say yes, despite the fact that traditional centers aren't what NBA teams build around, partially because very few are as dynamic and just as great on both sides of the ball as Joel Embiid is. Like, you maybe got to see in front of your very eyes, this is what Joel Embiid can be if he has a little bit more talent around him, which is where you come back to Tyrese Maxey, fantastic. Paul George, if he can be the Paul George that you're paying for, if he can be that legitimate number 2, number 3 option on any given night, all of a sudden, are we going to unlock this Joel Embiid in the postseason for the Philadelphia 76ers? Maybe. I don't know. But when you watch that game and you see how Embiid met the moment, didn't shy away from it, wasn't afraid to take it at Jokic. He did have a play late in the game where he really did. He got the ball at the top of the arc and he went to go kind of take a couple of steps, and he very clearly wanted to drive on Jokic to try to draw that 5th foul and get Jokic out of the game, and he lost the ball. It was a bummer, and you could see that he was upset with himself. But like, for the most part down the stretch, Embiid executed on a much higher level than I think many of us are used to seeing him connect on. And there were moments where he got doubled out at the top of the arc, and there's a play late in that game where he went to drive, the ball gets kind of knocked away, he recoups it, gets doubled, and like in earlier Joel Embiid years, he would have panicked and thrown the ball away. But in this like evolving version of Joel Embiid's game, he not only met that moment, but almost immediately found Anthony Edwards in the corner. Now, Anthony Edwards rimmed out a 3, but it's like you can see where there have been strides. Like a few years ago, whenever I would see Joel Embiid get faced with a double team, I would always kind of lose it because it's like, the double's coming. Like, how is nobody preparing this guy to like be ready to have the ball in his hands at any given time and know that there's going to be significant pressure? He's the best player on the team. Most of the time, he's the best player on the floor. And it always felt like he just had a hard time. Like he was slow to process the double team coming his way. This game was like the perfect microcosm, right? It was this like perfect little distilled moment where you could say, it looks like his game is evolving. And if that's a sign of what is to come this year, imagine a wide open Paul George in the corner. Imagine a wide open Tyrese Maxey with the ability to cut to the hoop. All of a sudden, if Joel Embiid has taken his game and his court vision to the next level in identifying that pressure when it comes, The Sixers are actually in very good shape. This is a potential really good thing. We'll go back over to the comments over on YouTube. Josh White says Embiid is king. Here's the interesting thing. Like, let's play this one out. If Embiid doesn't play that game, or if Anthony Davis gets minutes over Joel Embiid, do you think that U.S. basketball wins? I know that there have been matchups where Anthony Davis is a better matchup against some other teams. And there is a case to be made that Anthony Davis might actually be a better matchup against France than Embiid. Like, you could just say hypothetically, Embiid against Gobert benefits the U.S. But Wembanyama is going to kill Embiid on lateral quickness. Like, there's an actual issue there. If you're Steve Kerr, do you play a Twin Towers defense? Do you play Embiid to match up with Gobert and then Anthony Davis to match up with Wembanyama? I'm assuming that they're going to have KD line up and match up with Wembanyama, but I'm not entirely sure that that'll be one of the fun things to watch. If Embiid doesn't do anything else, if the gold medal game against France happens and Embiid doesn't play much, I can't envision a scenario where he doesn't play at all. But like, let's say Embiid only plays 10 minutes against France, the U.S. wins the gold medal, everybody's happy. Legacy-wise, does it hurt Joel Embiid if he isn't a massive factor in a gold medal game? I don't think so. I said last week that like you could be in the situation if you're Embiid where like the legacy component of like winning a gold medal and having that on your resume is huge. But like there was the counter argument, and we saw it because he was benched a few games ago, that like if you pick the U.S. and you don't play, and Steve Kerr doesn't believe in you enough or think that you're critical enough to play, legacy-wise, it does hurt you. Like, Jason Tatum is going through is in his feelings right now, and maybe rightfully so. He just won an NBA championship, and he's getting DNPs from Steve Kerr. And again, his mom is saying on Twitter, like, no, he's not hurt. We don't know what's going on. Like, for Jason Tatum, man's getting paid a lot of money, just won a championship. He probably is going to have hurt feelings over it. He might never play for the U.S. again, not because the U.S. program wouldn't want him back on the team in 4 years, but like if you're Jason Tatum, you have to feel kind of disrespected given what you just accomplished. There's a chance he won't play again. If you're Joel Embiid, I don't know what 4 years is going to look like from now, right? We have no idea. Like, Joel Embiid could just as easily be still like quasi MVP form Joel Embiid, just as much as it could be like he had 3 more debilitating injuries and like there's no way he's playing in 2028. We have no clue. But like Embiid is now at this point where like legacy-wise, because of what he just delivered in that Serbia game and because he was so critical on both ends of the court, including some critical blocks late in the game, legacy-wise, Joel Embiid has delivered exactly what he was supposed to. And when you're playing in the international game, this is the beauty of it. When you have as much talent and skill as the U.S. team has, you have the ability to play different lineups, different kinds of matchups, depending on the game. U.S. basketball theoretically could play Anthony Davis and could play Bam Adebayo more than they'll play Joel Embiid in the gold medal game. And I would argue that it doesn't change anything in terms of legacy for Joel Embiid. It doesn't hurt him. It doesn't hurt his stock. Nobody will walk away from the Olympics saying, oh, Joel Embiid, it's great that he helped against Serbia, but then he didn't really play much at all in the gold medal game. What a failure, what a loser. I don't think that's going to be the case. I genuinely think that like he has now cemented himself as not being viewed as a waste or that this is like anyway a negative or a negative reflection on his ability. I think that we've now gotten past that. So if you're Joel Embiid, you have to feel significantly better. I'm looking over here because trying to monitor when the Eagles take the field, because that will kind of line up with our watch-along component of today's show. I'm interested to see, and let me know in the comments, what you're looking for in the preseason game. And let me know if you are in any way, shape, or form actually putting significant stock into what you see. I'll go back over the comments here, and then we'll kind of go back and forth between the watch-along and anything else that pops up in the comments. But we'll go over to let's see, Ford. Ford is checking in on a Friday night. Ford, thanks for joining. And I think this came in when we were talking about saying Embiid needed to have a big game against Jokic, and that's why he was there. Now, Josh White dropping a little bit of stats here. When Embiid and Jokic were on the court at the same time in the U.S. versus Serbia game, Embiid had 19 points and Jokic had 6. Now, again, it's not as if each and every possession it was Joel Embiid against Nikola Jokic. Again, I'm going to shout out LeBron James for really, especially late in that game, trying to do his best on his own to take out Jokic. And again, you have to remember, Jokic was riding on 4 fouls late in that game for quite a while. It's interesting. All right, let's kind of turn the page here to the Eagles as they're getting ready to take the field and the starters are getting ready to take the field. And I've got a question in here from Chris Freed. Will watch-alongs include the Flyers games this fall? I doubt it. I very, very highly doubt it. I can't envision a scenario wanting to do that, Chris. I'm going to be at enough of the Flyers home games, assuming everything goes the way that I want it to. I will be at enough Flyers games in person that, like, when they play on the road, I will probably, in a lot of nights, watch them on the DVR. They are going to get enough of my time and enough of my energy. Now, is it possible, Chris? Is it? Yes. If between Snow the Goalie and the Russ Joy Show, if I found enough local sponsors, restaurants, whatever, to do watch parties and stuff, that's probably the way to go. And I've talked to Ant and Bundy about potentially doing more like watch-along live shows like we did with La Cecilia and Snow the Goalie late in the season, because that was a lot of fun. We had a really nice turnout. I think we had 100 people or something, close to 100 people at La Cecilia. They drove all the way out to Oxford, PA, like down near the Maryland border. We had people who were driving 2 hours from Jersey. We had people who drove from Berks County, people driving from Bucks County. That's serious commitment. That's what Snow the Goalie brings. I don't know. Is it possible that we could do some for away games? Maybe. I have no idea. Somebody pays us. I'm pretty easy, right? If somebody wants to pay to have us come and do a live show, by all means, we'll do a live show. All right, let's see. As we get ready for the watch along, and I'm asking what you're looking for and how much stock you're putting into tonight's game, Josh White says nothing major, but looking for somebody to grab that wide receiver 3 spot. Johnny Wilson, Paris Campbell, John Ross. The beauty, and this is where we're probably all a little bit spoiled, right, is that the Eagles for a very long time didn't have a number 1 receiver. And for a very long time, you could almost make a case there were seasons that they didn't really even have a number 2 receiver, or they would have a number 2 as their number 1, or they would have a number 4 as their number 2. And the fact that you get to go into yet another season with arguably the best wide receiving duo in all of football in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith is something that almost feels like an unfair luxury to have. Right? There are very few teams that can boast having a duo like that on the field. Now, it looks like the Eagles are going to kick off first, so the defense will be on the field to start. Now, a lot of this watch-along component is really going to come down to whether or not this thing moves pretty quickly. If it doesn't, I don't know. Are we going to want to stand? Am I going to want to stand here on this bad foot and an ankle for a half hour, 45 minutes? I don't know, but we'll try. We'll get through it. I feel bad for the podcast people, though, because as they listen, they'll get the experience, but after the fact. Now, here's one thing about the preseason. Let's have a moment. Hold on. Maybe we'll switch it. We'll have the moment of honesty over in the other camera. There we go. We'll do a little moment of honesty over here. I usually don't like the preseason. I typically don't like the preseason. I think the preseason is mostly a waste. If you told me that between the owners and the Players Association that they were all kind of on board with the idea of taking this thing to 18 regular season games, 19 regular season games, and getting us down to 1, maybe 2 at most preseason games, I'm all in. I get the health concerns. I get the fact that people are genuinely worried about the health of players and about the potential for CTE and concussions. I just like good football. These guys get, in a lot of cases, these guys get paid a lot of money. They know what the risks are. I feel bad for the fringe guys who don't get paid a lot. I don't want anybody to end up with CTE or concussions, but I don't like preseason football. I don't think that the 53rd spot on the roster is that important. I think that if you're genuinely concerned about the 53rd spot on the roster, chances are your team's not going to go very far. chances are you're a team like the Bears who are being featured on Hard Knocks. If you're the Eagles and you're actively trying to win the Super Bowl, I'm not so sure that you need to see multiple preseason games or more than 2 to get a real feel for what your team is and what your team is going to be. Now the Eagles and the Ravens are getting ready. They are lining up right now for kickoff. I'm going to be interested to see if the offense runs through Hurts to start. Are we going to see him take off? It looked like in camp, from the clips that have been coming out, that Jalen Hurts' mobility is significantly better, is improved, is back to what it was 2 years ago. I don't like the fact that I often kind of relitigate things that we've seen in the past. But last year, Hurts very clearly didn't look like himself. So I'll be interested to see if his legs are back. I don't expect the Eagles to put him in a risky position. All right, let's see. And the game is underway. The Eagles are receiving to start. I was wrong. I saw Jake Elliott before, and I panicked a little bit. We're going to get our first look tonight at Jalen Hurts and the rest of the Eagles offense. Or we're not. That's not. By God, that's Kenny Pickett's music. We're not getting Jalen Hurts. Do we want to watch along with this? We were told the starters were going to play. There are no starters. I see Britton Covey. I see Gainwell. Oh, no. Saquon Barkley, no pads. Oh, guys, I don't think this is happening. I went off of a tweet of one of the Eagles reporters saying the starters are playing a series. There are no starters. Let's watch Kenny Pickett. I can't believe I'm going to say it. Let's watch Kenny Pickett. Let's see if anything exciting happens. Kenny Pickett out to the flat. Is that Britton Covey? Sure was. All right, guys, we can hang out with this for a second, but this ain't it. This actually kind of makes the case for me why I don't like the preseason. I don't care about these guys. I feel great for them that they're getting a chance to compete for jobs in the NFL. This is unwatchable shit. I actually do have a qualm. I have a problem. I would love for people to give me their thoughts on it. I know that typically no one feels bad for season ticket holders. I totally get it. If you have the money, especially for Eagles season tickets, which are just unbelievably expensive, and I could make the case that like football is the sport that you should absolutely watch from the comfort of your home, because football seats, if you're in the upper levels, not particularly exciting or great in any way. The lines of vision are fine, but like they're not perfect. The sight lines are okay. The idea that you have to pay full price for preseason to go watch this, like to watch these teams, no starters. Do you feel bad for season ticket holders? Because I kind of do. Like if I had to pay full, if I were a Ravens season ticket holder, right? And it's like, oh, cool. Maybe we'll get to see 2 MVPs go head to head as Jalen Hurts takes on Lamar Jackson. And instead, I have to go and watch Kenny Pickett. Like if you're watching along right now, if you're pretty synced up to where I'm at, it's mostly purple seats. Like Ravens fans haven't even shown up for this game. Now, you know what? The Lincoln's different because everybody lives and dies with every single game, and the Eagles are the main show in town. But like, can you imagine paying regular season ticket prices as a season ticket holder to watch this slop? And again, no offense to the guys who are trying to battle for jobs. They have to do this, and I feel great for them. And when they make hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars because they earn spots on the team and on the roster because of games like this, fantastic. But this is slop. This is the kind of stuff that like I just don't get. I don't know why we do this. Chris Freed asks, is there a drinking game for this preseason game? I don't know what the drinking game would be, Chris. Do you drink until Kenny Pickett turns into Jalen Hurts? If you do, chances are you're dead. So probably don't. I think the better call here is to go find something on Netflix tonight and enjoy that. Here's the funny thing, though, and we'll actually talk about this next week with like the radio stuff and when I have that guest on next week. But like, this is where I kind of do feel bad for sports talk radio hosts. Because like while most of them will probably spend the vast majority of next week talking about this preseason game, even though there are other teams to talk about, they could talk about the Phillies. They'll probably talk about the Phillies, especially if they have a good series, rest of the series against the Diamondbacks. And they could talk about potentially Embiid in the gold medal game on Monday. The vast majority of sports talk radio next week, for better or worse, is going to be about this game. And like, again, since I don't particularly like it or enjoy it, like, we might talk about something if anything big happens in this game. But like, even if you were going to play the game of like, oh, significant injury takes the headlines out of this game, I don't exactly know who the big injury is. Again, I don't want anybody to be hurt, but like, this ain't it. I think I'm actually like ready to we'll stick with it through the first drive. But then after that, like, we're out. Let me know in the comments though, like, am I off base? Like, do any of you who watch this, do you actively love and appreciate the preseason? Does this make you feel frisky? Does the preseason, does it tickle your fancy? If it does, your fancy's broken and probably shouldn't be tickled. There's a real problem. If you actively enjoy the preseason, you've got to be like one of the biggest football fans in the world. If you're like living and dying with this, like if you're gonna go get like a Ross tattoo, if he were to catch that and go to the house because of this one preseason game, you probably need help. If you're betting on these games preseason, I don't know what to tell you. All right, I spent a lot of my day writing and editing stuff about legal online sports betting. And I don't shame you for betting on it, but the preseason, no. Too much volatility. I can't imagine, like, this is the other thing. Again, Eagles reporters were saying the starters are going to play one series tonight. They're not. If you had placed a pregame bet on this, or if you'd placed like a first quarter spread, based on the idea that like Hurts is going to play, the starters are going to be out there, or you placed a bet on the outcome of the first drive, right? This is like where I think the money aspect of this and the betting aspect of it is actually kind of interesting. If you went into the first preseason game between Eagles and Ravens and you thought that Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown were all going to be playing, and you pregame placed a bet on the outcome of the first drive, you probably would have at least expected them to get points, and maybe you would have said, I'm going to bet on them to score a touchdown, only to find out slightly before kickoff, or maybe like me, you found out as they were taking the field, Kenny Pickett is playing and none of the starters are. If you already placed that bet, you're out your bet, because now they had a 3 and out. Like, it's over. There goes your drive. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of problematic, but that's neither here nor there. We'll go over to the comments here before we roll out. Josh White says, I enjoy watching the young guys fight for a roster spot, but it's not good football really at all. And the thing is, like, it's a nice thing that you have a bunch of guys who are either fighting for that final spot or are getting themselves enough film or getting enough of their play on film that other teams can potentially consider giving them a shot. And we see this almost every year, right? Where there's like a guy who gets cut from a team, ends up bouncing around a couple, maybe gets onto a practice squad, and then for whatever reason lands with a team, maybe a later season call-up off the practice squad, ends up becoming a difference maker, and then like you go back and you say, man, how did so many teams screw this up? How did so many teams miss this guy? But like when you're a Super Bowl contender or even a Super Bowl favorite, again, like I don't think that the 53rd spot on the roster really means anything. But for a team that is a bad team or a potentially like rebuilding team, I totally understand why preseason games are meaningful, even if it means you don't see the best players on your team. There are plenty of spots in that case that are up for grabs. Now, what'll be interesting, and I'm always kind of locked in on, is when Hard Knocks happens. Like I was just watching, I got to kind of watch in the background the first episode of the Bears Hard Knocks season. You start to grow to like a lot of the dudes who are battling for the final spot on the roster, and you oddly find yourself like trying to find out if that guy had a good game before the next episode comes out. And if you know that guy like didn't factor into the game plan at all, you like kind of have this little part of you that's like hoping that they're going to get picked up by another team, maybe even by your team. So I get that. I think that that's like where the human connection thing is actually a lot more meaningful, and like maybe that's where the preseason is meaningful. First play for the Ravens, this Eagles defense just got gutted. Now, the thing that you can kind of feel better about is that this isn't the full starting unit, but I do see Jalen Carter out there. So, not exactly ideal. You know what? This actually does look like a good number of the starters are in there, or at least some potentially impactful defensive players are out on the field. We're not going to hang around for all of this, but that's not exactly the most encouraging thing. I can already hear Seth Joyner screaming somewhere into the abyss. Oh, a screen pass. That 15-yard pickup. Not ideal. Not great. We're going to have to end this before, we're going to have to end this show before the Ravens score a touchdown, because if they go down and score one, it's not going to be great. Let's see. Chris Freed says preseason football is an embarrassment anymore. And also notice that if folks are gambling on the first drive of a preseason game, we're near the end of the world. Well, then in that case, we are very well past the end of the world, Chris. Like, there are people who bet on virtually everything and do like microtransactional betting now. So, you know, I don't necessarily advocate for that. I don't shame anybody, but, you know, preseason, I'm not so sure. All right, so I think we're going to wrap, because I don't think we need to do the watch along for the rest of the first defensive series by the Eagles. I want to thank everybody who joined me live on this somewhat unexpected later night edition of the Russ Joy Show. I want to thank everybody who checked in live on YouTube, the people who watched on Facebook, the people who watched on X. Also, it was on Instagram Live, and there were some people who checked in over there as well. I want to thank all of you. I appreciate all of you tremendously. I'll be back on Tuesday. We'll do a regular 8 a.m. Tuesday show. Friday's show is going to be a little bit different. Friday, again, is the day that I expect to have a guest. We're going to talk a little bit more of the radio side of things, a little bit of sports talk radio, because there have been some ratings rumors behind the scenes. I think the next ratings book is set to come out, or it might have already run, might have already come out. Some interesting things happening between the Fanatic and WIP, and Mike Missinelli's back on the Fanatic. I'll kind of react to that and give you some thoughts on Philly radio and whether it's good or not that Missinelli's back and all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about that probably on Friday's show with a guest. So come back next week. I look forward to talking to all of you. In the meantime, you can tweet at me over on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. Make sure, if you haven't done so already, that you like this video, share the video, subscribe to the Russ Joy Show on YouTube. If you're watching, or you subscribe and follow on the Joy Media account on YouTube, I appreciate you as well. If you listen in the podcast feed, do me a favor, send the link to the episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever to friends, to family. Let them know about the show. And of course, if you are listening on Spotify, go to the show page, click the star rating, leave a 5-star rating. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, by all means, leave a 5-star rating and a 5-star review. I'll read it on the show. So if it's a great thing, if you're like, Russ, this show brings so much joy to my day, I just wanted to say thanks for that. You can do that. But if you hate it, if you're like, Russ, this is a shitty show, you should smash your camera, take the wire out of the back of your mic, and walk away. Leave that as a 5-star review, and I'll read that too. No shame. No shame. The Ravens finished their first series with a field goal. That seems like a pretty good time to sign off. So, again, thank you to all of you. I will talk to all of you Tuesday here on The Russ Joy Show. Talk to all of you on Tuesday.